Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week I had the pleasure of sitting down with Kristen and Nate Hedrick to discuss their journey paying off $250,000 of student loan debt. On the show, we discussed their motivation and why for aggressively paying down the debt, what the pivot moment was that motivated them to make the debt repayment a priority, how they were able to come up with more than $3,000 per month extra to throw towards the loans, and the role a side hustle and real estate investing played in helping them pay down the debt. Before we jump into the show, I recognize that many listeners may not be aware of what the team at YFP Planning does in working one-on-one with more than 250 households in 40 plus states. YFP Planning offers fee-only high-touch financial planning that is customized to the pharmacy professional. If you're interested in learning more about how working one-on-one with a certified financial planner may help you achieve your financial goals, you can book a free discovery call at yfpplanning.com. Whether or not YFP Planning's financial planning services are a good fit for you, know that we appreciate your support of this podcast and our mission to help pharmacists achieve financial freedom. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Nate and Kristen Hedrick to learn how and why they aggressively paid off $250,000 in student loan debt. Kristen and Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim. Great to be here.
So Nate, obviously you're a frequent flyer. You're old news, so I'm not even going to spend a whole lot of time focusing on you. Many folks have heard you on the podcast before, whether it's this show talking about home buying, whether it's the real estate investing podcast on Saturday mornings, of course, Nate being the co-host of that show. So we're going to focus a little bit more on Kristen's background as we get started, and then we're going to jump into more about your debt-free journey and how ultimately you guys were able to knock out $250,000 of debt and what that has meant to you guys personally, to your family, as well as to the financial goals and plan that you have going forward. So before we jump into that debt payoff and that journey, Kristen, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit more about your background, what drew you into pharmacy, where you went to school, and the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks. So I had some extended family members in pharmacy, so I just thought it would be a good career path and looked at the different pharmacy schools and found my way to Ohio Northern in the middle of cornfields and no cell phone reception. And for some reason, that's where I wanted to go. I think we all know it's a great campus and community there. So went to Ohio Northern, and that's where Nate and I met. I completed my residency here in Cleveland, Ohio, and now I work for a large health system doing population health, clinical pharmacy, and following patients with their chronic disease states and helping them with their medicines and loving it here in Cleveland.
Kristen, it's funny you mentioned the cell phone reception in Ada, Ohio, at Ohio Northern University. Like I remember, maybe I was a P3, P4. I was just a few years ahead of you guys, but like it was a big deal that they added a tower on campus. And I think we got like one bar, maybe two bars, but not a whole lot going on in Ada, Ohio. I had the chance to go back recently and take Jess and the boys, and it was so fun to just see campus and relive some of the memories in that place. So Nate, tell us about the student loan debt at its peak. What were you guys working with? And then from there, we'll get into more of some of the motivation and journey of paying it off.
Yeah. So when we graduated and kind of told everything up, and I think it was even a month or two after we graduated that I even wanted to look at it, right? Because it was kind of that initial plan of, I just won't look at it and then it'll be a problem. And when we told it all up, looking back at our highest count, we were at $316,000 in student loan debt at one point. So that was the worst that it got. And at that same month, for what it's worth, we had a negative net worth of $306,000. So we had about $10K to our name and a bunch of debt to add on to that.
I'm curious, did that surprise you guys? One of the stories I often share is that it's somewhat embarrassing, but when I was in pharmacy school, it felt a little bit like Monopoly money. And it was all of a sudden when I crunched the numbers and I was like, I owe how much and how much interest and what's my net worth? And it caught me off guard, and it shouldn't have. But were you expecting that, or was that number somewhat a surprise at that point?
I agree. It was just totally like made up funds. You know, every quarter or every semester I'd have to go and submit for what I needed. And it was, you know, the tuition plus a little bit of living expenses. And I would just submit for it and it would get added to this imaginary pile of money somewhere. And I don't think I ever checked the balance while I was in school. I don't know why I would have.
You're dating yourself, Nate, when you talk about quarters, by the way. So that ain't a thing anymore.
Old school Ohio Northern, yeah.
Kristen, tell us about the plan that you guys had for the student loans after graduation, after you get married in 2013. How did you feel about the debt overall? And then what was the thought in that moment about how are we going to pay these off?
I think our main thought was it's overwhelming. And it's just such a large amount that it just feels so ambiguous that we thought that we had this plan. We had always wanted to try to pay it off within 10 years. I think I was a little more on track of, I want to pay this off in 10 years. And we had some advice from a previous financial advisor that had said, it's just student loan debt. Everyone has it. It will be okay. And, we changed it to 30 years so we could have minimum payments, but always pay extra if we wanted to. And ultimately, we just found that eventually did not work as well for us. We needed a more targeted plan to kind of get us on track with what we were doing. We had always been paying the amounts, but I think it was how we were planning to target to actually pay it off. It always felt like this end date that we were never going to get to.
And one of the questions I like to ask folks, and we'll talk more in a little bit about how aggressive you guys were to really get a chunk of this paid off, but I like to understand, what's the why? What's the motivation behind it? It's one of these things, as you mentioned, you can take them out 25, 30 years if you want to. Obviously, you guys made the decision to be much more aggressive. Tell me more about, for the two of you, for your family, why was that important?
It's funny you say that, because I think until I had a why, it wasn't important. Like I said, I didn't look at it. I barely wanted to check it. I think at one point in residency, I put myself on the graduated repayment plan, and my only motivation was because the payment today is lower, and that seems better, right? I had no plan early on, but until we kind of developed a why, which was getting our financial house in order so that we could live the way that we wanted to, right? Travel, work less, work in the capacities that we wanted to, all the things that have kind of led us to this point. Until I had that in place, there wasn't a why, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's such a good encouragement for folks that are in the midst of their journey, or maybe have wandered into the repayment, or for that matter, the financial plan at large, and feel like, hey, maybe I'm progressing, but not as quickly as I'd like to, or I'm a little bit stuck. Really going back to what gets us excited, right? The topic of money's a tool. So what gets us excited? Why do we care about this topic of money? Why do we care about debt repayment? Why do we care about saving and investing for the future? Why do we care about giving? And then really using that as the motivation to drive some of the action in the plan going forward. So Nate, what happened in 2016 that was really a motivation to say, hey, we've got to do something different?
Yeah, that really is when it kind of changed for us. And again, we'd been paying on them, and every once in a while we get the idea that, hey, we should throw some extra money at these loans. They're huge. And we would do it for a couple of months. And I feel like we just were inconsistent. But in 2016, we got pregnant with our first child. And again, I tell this story on the podcast several times, but I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it completely changed my mindset about money and what I wanted to do with money and what I wanted to do with my life and work and just how I looked at finances. And it's crazy that it took that long to figure that out, but I had no formal financial education, right? We would go through pharmacy school, not business school. And until I read that book and kind of changed how I wanted to approach finances in general, again, I didn't have that why behind it. I didn't have that motivation. So that's what really jump-started us. I think it was a combination of, oh crap, we have a kid on the way and we have to pay for a lot of stuff. And again, this mindset shift that occurred, at least for me.
Kristen, I'm curious, I can just see Nate, because I know him now. I can see him just totally nerding out over Rich Dad, Poor Dad and coming to you with all of these ideas and what about this, what about that? Were you equally on fire in that moment, or was there different motivations that really led you to say, hey, we've got to do this differently?
Yeah, I think I had always wanted to pay off the loan. Again, it was a large amount that I think I didn't know how to get there. And when Nate said he read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he kept talking about it. And I think finally in 2019, I read it and I said, oh, this is a really good book. I should have done it sooner. So I think we are a really good team together and trying to work together and get those payments down. And Nate was very much more into it. I think at the time I was like, I'm growing a human. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that was the time that Nate entered real estate. And he's told this story before, but I'm 6 months pregnant and he goes, oh, I think I want to get my real estate license. And this is the time most people would have been getting board certified. And he's like, oh, I'm going to go get my real estate license. And he had classes multiple times a week. And I'm, pregnant, trying to take care of the house and do all these things, getting ready for a baby. So it paid off in the end and I'm glad that he did it. But I think in the moment there was also that, that stressful situation for me. But he's a jack of all trades. He does lots of things and keeps busy. So it's good.
And we're going to come back to that in a little bit of, what role did that play, Nate, for you in terms of, pursuing that, I guess you call it a side hustle. It's much bigger than that, the work that you're doing now, obviously. But why was that so instrumental, not only to the numbers, but also to some of the mindset and the motivation behind, the financial plan and the journey that you were on? I want to first talk about, though, Nate, walk us through what happened in the pandemic that really, allowed you guys to say, hey, we're going to get specific about when we're going to pay off a big chunk of this debt, what it's going to take each month. Talk to us about what happened during the pandemic that led you to the decision around how you were going to pay off a huge portion of that debt.
Yeah. So like I said, in 2016 is when we started getting pretty serious, but even then it wasn't a truly resolute plan, right? It was just, okay, we really got to be focusing on throwing extra money at this. And we did a lot better. But in 2020, we had a month or two into the pandemic and realized like, okay, well, we're not traveling as much. We're not going to be going out to eat as much. Everything's shut down. Like, let's use this time to take the extra money that we're not spending and really attack that loan. And then at one point, and again, we were talking this morning, it was right at the end of the year, we said, okay, this thing is not going away. Like, let's really use next year to just get rid of this loan. And so right in December of 2020 and going into the beginning of the new year, we said, like, let's figure out a number. What is it that's going to take to get this loan knocked out at the end of the year? And who cares what the balance is right now? We're going to do it in a year. Let's make sure to get it done. And so we did some crunching of some numbers and basically said, okay, if we can pay everything we're paying today, but also throw an extra $3,443 at the loan every single month, mine will be gone by the end of the year and it'll just be knocked out. And so that number, like I wrote it on a big note card over here and it became like actually I've got it here. I'll grab it. Here you go. So there's the evidence, right? 3443. And so like that became I put that everywhere and it became the mantra of like, if we can do that every single month, this will be gone. And that was such a huge motivator for us.
So I don't want to brush over that because we'll talk in a moment. I mean, that's a big number. So we're going to talk about, the how of that. But tell us more about how you were able to get to that conclusion and get on the same page with that conclusion, and what I'm specifically getting at here is, was it hey, budget status quo and we're going to find ways to grow our income? Was it we're going to cut some expenses? And how did you guys work through the details, Kristen, to ultimately say, yep, it's 3,443 and this is how we're going to do it?
I think it was a little bit of a combination of both. So, during the pandemic, we had a little bit more interest, I think, also in doing some real estate investing and had an opportunity. We said, okay, do we take this money and do we put it towards real estate or do we pay down the loan more? And eventually we decided real estate, but we said, hey, like maybe we should aggressively pay off our loan a little bit more if we aren't traveling and doing these things. So I think in December, we had a lot of discussion about it and both of us just decided like, yes, we both want that to be our goal, that starting January 1st, we really start cutting back on what we're spending. And I think really from any area that we could, we went through our budget, we scrubbed it. We said, what are we spending money on? What are the subscriptions we have? What can we cut out? What can we save money on? Which of those little purchases can we just stop doing? Which things do we think that we need? Can we actually hold off on buying? And then certainly Nate's side hustle helped with that as well. So I think it was both a combination of let's cut back to really like bare minimum spending. We weren't eating out. We weren't getting the extra cups of coffee from Starbucks. We weren't doing the purchases at Target that said, this is what you need. This is in the dollar spot. Like we just kind of stopped all of that. And then Nate worked as hard as he could with his real estate really as a motivator to keep putting that extra money towards it as well.
Yeah, I think we quickly realized that just trying to find an extra $3,000 in the budget, like we weren't overspending by $3,000 every month. Like that was not it. And so it became like my challenge to say, okay, well, how can I work at this side hustle to really get us the rest of the way? So the expenses were the kind of the catalyst. And then it was the extra income side of the equation that really boosted everything to actually make it possible.
Yeah, what I love about that is, certainly cutting expenses, especially short term, if you're focused on a goal, here we're talking about debt repayment, can be really valuable, but it also can be a grind. I mean, it can be soul sucking sometimes, and I think that one of the things I love about the approach that you took is if you're moving both sides of the equation, there's a different level of momentum and mindset that comes from that. And maybe the numbers aren't as big, for other folks that are pursuing ideas, but if you can both focus on, hey, how can we grow the income and how can we cut the expenses, you all of a sudden feel like you're picking up, momentum in a significant way. But I don't want to brush over that number. $3,443 per month. That's for many pharmacists, if we assume $120,000 of wages, like it's about half of take-home pay. I mean, for a lot of folks, we look at that on a monthly basis. So that's certainly commendable. And that's a big number. Nate, I want to ask the question that I know the listeners are thinking, which is, Nate, Kristen, you guys are smart. Like, $3,443, why not invest that money? Why not, put that out so we can see that grow and compound over 20, 30, 40 years? Like, how did you guys reconcile this ongoing debate which is, maybe a little bit of a moot point right now because of the administrative forbearance, but this ongoing debate of should I pay down the debt or should I invest and save for the future?
Yeah, and that's been something we struggled with for years, right? Like, should we go out and buy another rental property or should we just take this money and throw it at the loan? And that's kind of been the back and forth. And so, like Kristen was saying, when we were evaluating whether we should be doing real estate or paying down the debt, we challenged ourselves to say, like, can we do both? And so for me, again, working and trying to add extra income to the equation, it became a game of, okay, if I can make $3,000 a month extra, right, that's going to get us there. But if I can make $4,000 or $5,000, right, that's another couple grand I can put at the real estate investing budget. So what we had a bucket in Ally, in our Ally bank account, that was the real estate investing fund. And we still have that. We still use it. It's a great way to like separate out our money. And I had to pull from that in any month that I didn't make enough income to like really make the difference. I had to pull out of that. So it was like this, I was afraid to give it up, right? And so it became a challenge to myself and to us really to cut our expenses and raise our income in a way where I could keep padding that account, that bucket, while also meeting our number. And so it was a double motivator of let's get rid of the debt. And I don't want to lose sight of the other thing that I'm really passionate about. So let's find a way to do both.
Kristen, we both know that kids can be expensive. We love them, but kids can be very expensive. And I think one of the challenges folks have that are, raising a young family, whether it's debt repayment, whether it's achieving other financial goals, is it's an expensive phase of life, right? The data, suggests that it's multiples of hundreds of thousands to be able to raise a child. And I'm curious of how you guys were able to reconcile this with young ones. And I know you guys are so active and intentional as a family now. Like, were you looking ahead to say, hey, this is a sacrifice now, but it's going to allow us to really push our goals forward as a family later in the future? Tell us about your thoughts through that.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember being pregnant in 2016 and just thinking like, oh my gosh, I already feel like we're living paycheck to paycheck. How are we possibly going to raise a child and afford daycare? And we even joke now, our big expenses, mortgage, childcare, and the student loan debt was there. Our mortgage was the least expensive of all of those. So yeah, certainly having kids, we always felt like we knew we wanted to have kids, and it was just figuring out how do we plan for that. And I think especially now, spending more time with the kids too, without having that student loan debt and being able to do more things and travel more, it feels like it's definitely paying off in the end with making some of those sacrifices or, making those adjustments, really that mindset change. I was joking this morning, like you said, Tim, it's a mindset change. And in 2021, we actually kept a list of things that what are things we didn't buy that we're going to buy when the student loan is paid off? And I was laughing because I'm like, we still haven't even bought these things yet. We just found that maybe we don't actually need them.
Yeah, and some of those behaviors, that's why I always, encourage folks, whatever goal you're working towards, some of those behaviors you implement that season will stay with you for the long run. And certainly there's a time and place to loosen the reins, right, a little bit and make sure we're living a rich life today as well as planning for the future. But, we'll talk about what that looks like for you guys. But some of those behaviors can stay long term, which I think is really incredible part of the journey. I want to touch on two things we've mentioned, but I think play a really important role to this journey, which is, number one, Nate, you talked about the side hustle you had working full time as a pharmacist, as a real estate agent that allowed you to accelerate some of the goals and momentum. And then the second being the investing in real estate, which much of our community already knows the work that you do there on the Real Estate Investing Podcast. But talk to us first about the side hustle as a realtor. When did you become a realtor? Why did you become a realtor? And ultimately, how have you been able to balance this while you're also, at the time working full time, you're raising a young family? Tell us about the decision to pursue that work and the role that it played in the debt repayment journey.
Yes, I mentioned that mindset shift that occurred in 2016, and I realized I needed just something else that was going to be able to supplement my pharmacy career, something where I could put extra effort in and get extra reward from doing that. And so real estate kind of became a natural fit. Again, it's mentioned a dozen times in Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I started reading other things about ways to diversify income streams, and you name it, right? Real estate was in that conversation. So I talked to my father-in-law who's been in real estate for years, and he's like, you should just get your license. And at the time that felt like, well, no, that's a different career. I can't do that. But as I looked into it, it was actually a really reasonable option to kind of supplement that. So I went, like Kristen said, to classes in 2016, got licensed in early 2017. And I assumed that everyone was all of a sudden going to come to me, right? All my family and friends were going to flock to me and say, Nate, buy and sell me a house. And it was, I think, 8 months before I had a real client and actually closed the deal. I mean, it was a long time. And that's because I wasn't putting the right amount of effort into it, and I wasn't targeting like what I needed to be doing, right? I wasn't niching down. And again, that's what led to the creation of Real Estate RPH and all the work that I do with pharmacists and the real estate community. And so all those things kind of progressed down the road to the point we're at today, where again, now I get to work with a bunch of active clients here in Cleveland. I help people all over the country with our real estate concierge service. And it's a really cool way to put my passion for real estate into the world of pharmacy that I kind of started out in. And again, it's also been a great way for us to supplement our income streams, just because it is something where I can put more effort in and get more dollars out as a result from doing that.
Yeah, and I want to put a plug in for it just so you don't have to as well. But, I think that service has really been so valuable to the community. So folks are, looking to buy a home, sell a home, looking to buy an investment property, and they're looking for an agent that would be a good fit for them. It's okay if you're not in the Cleveland area where Nate is. He's built a network of agents all across the country that have supported other pharmacists. So if you go to your financialpharmacist.com, you click on home buying, you'll see a section for find an agent. And from there, you can get connected with Nate further. Kristen, I want to ask you about the real estate investing side, just because Nate talks about this on the podcast every week. But I know, because I've seen it offline through some of the times I'm talking with Nate and you guys are crunching numbers on a property and you're in the spreadsheets punching numbers. Is this a good deal? Is this not a good deal? Tell us more about the vision that you guys have had for real estate investing for you as a family, why that's been a good fit, and the approach that you've taken thus far in your real estate investing journey.
I think we always had an interest in real estate investing. My family has some experience with it. Like Nate mentioned, my dad is a realtor. So we knew it was something we eventually wanted to do. It was just kind of figuring out how do we put it as part of our plan. But when Nate said he was interested, I was all on board. But I was also, that type A risk-averse pharmacist that said, how do we do this? I have no idea. So I vividly remember a lot of my commutes listening to Bigger Pockets, reading a lot of real estate books just to fill my brain with the information I felt that I needed to feel comfortable with real estate investing. And we always knew that we wanted to have those properties. I think one of the biggest things I had learned from Bigger Pockets was, one great thing about real estate investing is even if something happens, you still own a building. Mm-hmm. Like you still have something physical there that you could sell. And we always knew we wanted it to be something to supplement with one of our investments.
Yeah. And so right now you guys have property, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got property in Northeast Ohio, and then you've also got property outside of the area, correct?
Yeah. So we've got properties here locally and then some up in Michigan as well.
Awesome. Love that. And folks can tune into the Real Estate Investing Podcast for more stories of other pharmacist real estate investors. So we've talked about really three main buckets that were instrumental in paying off this $250,000 of debt. And that was, I'd categorize as hustle, right? Cutting your expenses at more than $3,000 per month, growing the income through the side hustle, and then also looking at how you're able to build a real estate investment portfolio. Were there other strategies that helped you along this way of paying off this debt?
There were little things. I think one that comes to mind for me is that we refinanced that loan, I think 4 different times. And a lot of that was because we were getting lower interest rates every single time. And the other was because we were able to get a big bonus. So if you have been on any of the YFP resources for loan pay down or for loan refinance, you get cash bonuses depending on your loan balance. And so a couple of times we would go out and refinance it, wait a couple of months, refinance it again, and we get a check and a lower interest rate. It just made a ton of sense. So that was a little thing that helped quite a lot along the way.
I think another thing that really helped us was working with Tim Baker and the planning team at YFP. They were very much instrumental in guiding us through and helping us make the decisions. I grew up putting my money under a mattress, making sure it's nice and crisp and counting it every week. And, when we started this journey, Nate wasn't financially savvy until really like 2016 when he got more into it after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So, I think working together and having a third party kind of objectively look at everything and give us some guidance was really helpful as well.
You don't have to make Tim's ego any bigger. No, I'm just
kidding. Yeah, don't
see if he's listening to that. So the question that, I'm begging to know the answer to is you guys were throwing a huge amount of money at this debt. Obviously, at some point you got that debt paid off and all of a sudden you're not having to make that big of a payment anymore. And I often think about this in the context of my journey, and I often chalk it up to where did that money go? Well, more kids got expensive, other things come along the way. But I also know you guys have been really intentional as a family about what are we trying to do in terms of experiences and how we want to be intentional with the resources and the money that you have each month. So, Kristen, talk to us about this journey after the $250,000 of debt. We're no longer making this massive, monthly payment. What's happening? What are we doing?
Well, we went to Disney World. Yeah. I feel like that's the most appropriate thing. Honestly, in some parts, it feels like it hasn't changed at all. We still have a lot of that mindset with being frugal and kind of just still saving for our future, but also trying to live in the moment. And we've done a lot of life planning as well and things that we want to do. So I think we're working on traveling more. Like I said, we went to Disney, hopefully some other trips coming up. Just being able to spend more time with the kids. I think people with children understand the first 5 years before they start school is like, it's just hectic and overwhelming. And we're just trying to take in all those moments before they head to school officially.
I love that, right? It goes quick. I know everyone says that, but it's real. And I think the intentionality around the experiences and making sure there's the budget there to support those experiences and to be able to enjoy those moments along the way. Nate, you recently shared publicly your decision to go from full-time work to part-time work in your pharmacist role. So we're going to officially call you a pseudo-pharmacist now.
That's fair. That's fair.
How much of a factor was getting to this point of having this $250,000 of debt paid off? How much of a factor was that and being able to approach that decision and ultimately feel confident in that decision?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, I can't say that when we started off, that was the plan, but as we got closer, we realized that it was a possibility. And I looked at the timing and I looked at where we were at and I said, look, this is like the last summer before our oldest goes off to kindergarten. And then it's just going to get crazier and crazier as time goes on. And so I took a step back and said, now that this debt is gone, we really can take a step back. And Kristen has been so supportive and helpful and allowing me to do that. But it's been really cool because now I can just focus on them for the summer. And those extra 20 hours that I found every single week is just, I'm on the kids' schedule. Like the other day, we had a day and it was raining in the morning. And so we went to the movies and we saw a kids movie. And then we got out and I was like, hey, it's sunny. Let's go to the playground. And so we did that. And it was just really cool to be on their schedule rather than some work schedule or something else that I, had to do or had to get done. There wasn't a time frame anymore. And that's been really cool. And again, without that debt being gone, there's no way we could have done that.
Yeah. What I love is I think both of you are such a great example where yes, you've got a PharmD. Yes, you've got, residency training. Yes, you could continue to, climb certainly in various clinical roles. And that opportunity is always there and will be there. But you also have some opportunity for flexibility in those roles. And I think sometimes we don't think creatively enough as pharmacists about how are we going to use our time each week. And that can change season to season. I worked with other pharmacists who, went through a season with young family and others where they pivoted to part-time roles or more flexible schedules. And then that changed again at a later point in time. And so I think there's, opportunities to make sure that we're coordinating our work plan with our life plan and with the financial plan as well. Kristen, I'll start with you and then Nate, if you have other thoughts as well. I'm someone listening who maybe I'm a student and I'm like, oh my gosh, thanks so much. I feel depressed about the journey ahead. Or maybe I'm in the middle of the debt repayment journey and I just feel like, when is this going to end? Or I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. What advice would you have for pharmacists that are in that debt repayment journey as they're trying to really navigate that path forward?
Yeah. And not to sound cheesy, but I think a really big player, at least for me, was the YFP planning team. We kind of felt like we had a plan, but we weren't really sure if it was a good plan. And so really it was after I had our second child and I was listening to a lot of podcasts. I'd go walking every day on maternity leave and I was listening to podcasts every time I would go for a walk. And I was like, we really need to look at this. I feel like we need a more set plan as to what we're doing, especially since you're such in an integral point in your life where you want to be able to spend extra time with the kids, but you also may feel like you can't financially do that. And so I think having that, like I said, that objective third party look at what you two are talking about as a couple can be really, really helpful and also helped us look at a lot of our other financial plan with the investments. Can we get into more real estate investing? Are we contributing enough to our 401ks? Are we, doing things that seem like we should be doing? So I think that's really, really been a big impact on us in being able to achieve this.
For sure.
Nate, any other words of wisdom, advice you'd have to folks that are kind of in the thick of it, if you will?
Yeah, I think for me, again, there's just for me, at least what worked was that this mindset shift away from being stuck at, okay, I only have this as my income, right? If I make $110,000 a year as a pharmacist, that's all I've got. And there's no other opportunities and I have to make it work with that money. I challenge everybody out there, and there's 1,001 different ways to do this, but you should find something where the more effort you put in, the more you get out of it. And that doesn't have to be money, right? That can be just time. That can be time with your family. That can be things that you enjoy doing. Whatever that is, find something that's going to supplement your life, that the more effort you put into it, the more reward you get out of it. And that's just a really great way to set yourself up for success.
I love that. And again, to reiterate what we talked about a little bit ago, the dollars are one piece of that, but don't underestimate the momentum that comes from that as well. And that momentum is so important as it relates to the financial plan. Here related to the debt repayment, but obviously could be other parts of the plan as well. So again, guys, congratulations on knocking out this huge chunk of debt. Really incredible to hear the story and the why behind it and how you're able to do it. Excited for what lies ahead for you guys. And thanks for taking time to come on the show.
Thanks, Tim. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.